welcome to Basic Bible Study. Thanks for joining us. These episodes, we are looking at Acts of the Apostles, the book which describes really the birth of the church in the first few decades after the ascension of the Lord. We are in chapter 17, which involves the second missionary journey of Paul. We may remember that Paul and Barnabas had decided to part ways because Barnabas wanted to have Mark, the writer of the Gospel of Mark, although he was at this point still very young, with them on the journey. And because Mark had, quote, deserted them at Pamphylia on the first journey, Paul didn't want, he was not being very forgiving. He didn't want Mark back. So Barnabas and Mark went off on their own missionary journey, and this is Paul's second journey as well, and he is with people such as Silas and Timothy. And he comes to, they're in Macedonia, which is to say northern Greece, and they come to Thessalonica, where, which is, it's a major city today in northern Greece. And it was at the time within a few decades of when Paul was there, it became a major seat of Christianity. We know, of course, the two letters to the Thessalonians were addressed to this community. So Paul eventually had, his preaching had quite a bit of success, bore quite a bit of fruit there in Thessalonica. But initially, it's sort of a textbook case. I've got a note to myself. Just read for a few verses here at the start of chapter 17, all right? When they took the road through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they reached Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue. Following his usual custom, Paul joined them, and for 3 Sabbaths he entered into discussions with them from the Scriptures, expounding and demonstrating that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead, and that this is the Messiah, Jesus, whom I proclaim to you. Some of them were convinced and joined Paul and Silas. So too, a great number of Greeks who were worshipers. And this is interesting because they say Greeks who are worshipers, all right? But these are Gentiles who are there with the with the Jews in the synagogue. A great number. It's just interesting how. I guess it's in part because the Gentiles don't have the Scriptures to argue about. They don't really, of course, these ones are worshiping there at the synagogue, but they don't have the same training in the Scriptures to be able to argue, I suppose, with Paul. His phenomenal success in city after city after city is with the Gentiles. But here we read, so too a great number of Greeks who were worshipers, and not a few of the prominent women. But the Jews became jealous and recruited some worthless men loitering in the public square. Don't you love the way Luke, tell us how you really feel about this, Luke. Some worthless men loitering in the public square. They formed a mob and set the city in turmoil. They marched on the house of Jason, intending to bring him before the people's assembly. When they could not find them, they dragged Jason and some of the brothers before the city magistrates, shouting, "These people have been creating a disturbance all over the world and have now come here, and Jason has welcomed them." If you're thinking, who's Jason? Well, so was I the first time I read Acts of the Apostles. He's apparently a host, one of the Christian brothers, no doubt. Probably a convert within Judaism to the way. And he's had Paul and Silas and Timothy perhaps there at the house. These people who have been creating a disturbance all over the world have now come here, and Jason has welcomed them. They all act in opposition to the decrees of Caesar. That's a frequent charge. Although there's absolutely no base to it, of course, and claim instead that there is another king, Jesus. They stirred up the crowd and the city magistrates, who, upon hearing these charges, took a surety payment from Jason and the others before releasing them. All right, that's, like I say, it's sort of a textbook case of what happens. Paul goes to a city, he goes to the synagogue. Some people are very taken with what he says. He has some success with some of the Jewish worshipers. He has much more success always with the Greeks, and he also inevitably gets controversy stirred up. He's got people who are, very much opposed to what he's preaching, to say that Jesus is the Messiah, to say that the Messiah Messiah would have suffered such a death, all this kind of thing, even though Paul is referring to the scriptures again and again and again. Isaiah 53, for instance, the suffering servant passage that the Ethiopian eunuch was reading when Philip found him. Paul is referring again and again to the prophecies that the Messiah would suffer, to the prophecies that in fact the Messiah would rise from the dead, would not see corruption in the grave, that his soul would not be abandoned to Sheol and that sort of thing. And it's enough to get the war drums going from those who do not want to accept Paul's understanding of the scriptures. The next city they go to is Beroea. It's not far from Thessalonica. They have a better reception there. And I have a note to myself just to quote this one verse. I really like this. It's a verse that has always stayed with me in my many times through this wonderful book. This is verse 11 of chapter 17. These Jews were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, for they received the word with all willingness and examined the scriptures daily to determine whether these things were true. So they were, Paul again is saying, read the scriptures, read Isaiah 53, read Psalm 22, read the prophecies of Malachi and Micah and so forth, and you'll see that the Messiah would suffer. The Messiah he would taste death, but he would not remain dead. He would rise, and that he would attract all people. Not just the Jews, but the Gentiles as well, to the worship of the true God, the God of Israel. And so that's in Beroea. They have a better reception, but as has happened before, some of the Thessalonians who oppose Paul come to Beroea and try to make trouble for him there as well. Paul goes on to Athens. Now, the story about Athens, it's just funny. We're told that, because Athens was a great cultural center, really, of the entire Roman Empire. I mean, the Romans took their gods and goddesses pretty much from the Greek gods and goddesses, the Greek pantheon. They just changed names, Aphrodite to Venus, and Ares to Mars, and Zeus to Jupiter, and so forth. And Luke tells us that Paul gets to Athens and he's disgusted by all the idols all over the city, that there's just, it's not just a great seat of learning, of course, and philosophy and all that kind of thing, but it's a great religious city. There are temples to all the gods and goddesses, and people are still, I don't know in the first century really how many Greeks or Romans believed, that Aphrodite actually existed or whatever. But certainly there were cults, there were devotions in the temples. People offered sacrifice and said prayers and lit incense and that kind of thing. And Athens was full of temples. And we're told that Paul he's exasperated at what he sees. And he notices one shrine there in Athens. It's a shrine to the unknown God. And he takes off from that. He tells the Athenians, he goes to the Areopagus, a place where, the Athenians would get together to discuss and debate, the great issues of the day or whatever. And Paul says, this shrine to the unknown God is in fact a shrine to the God you do not know, but I can tell you about that God. And we're told that the Athenians, listened to him with, some curiosity, really is what we're told, is that they listen to him with some curiosity, because the Athenians are always chasing after novelty. According to Luke, this is verse 21 of chapter 17. Now all the Athenians, as well as the foreigners residing there, use their time for nothing else but telling or hearing something new. That's really quite a put down, Luke. I mean, all the Athenians and all the foreigners living there, all they wanted was novelty. They only wanted to hear about new things. And, well, certainly Paul's telling them something new. And they hear about, this idea of the resurrection of the dead and that kind of thing. It's a first for them. And but this group of Gentiles really doesn't respond that well. There's a point at which it's verses 32 and 33. Where the men there in the Areopagus say, we should like to hear more about this at another time. It's like, okay, we've heard enough. It's like, yeah, come back another time and yeah, tell us more. We want to move on to something else at this point. He did not have much success there. We are told that he did win over a few people. Here's the list. It's short. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some began to scoff, but others said, "We should like to hear you on this at some other time." And so Paul left them. But some did join him and become believers. Among them were Dionysius, a member of the court of the Areopagus, a woman named Damaris, and others with them. So not a huge success among the Gentiles there in the cultural capital, really, certainly of the Eastern Mediterranean world, but really I would say Athens was it was the cultural capital of the Roman Empire. Greek was a language that anybody who had an education spoke. Paul spoke it. He was addressing them in their own language. In other words, it was the literary language, the poetic language, the language of drama in the Roman Empire. Latin was the legal language. And these are kind of like, sophisticated, elitist kind of, I don't know, I just don't know how to put it. There wasn't a whole lot of humility among the Athenians, as interested as they were in religion and in new things. And Paul was giving them religion and was giving them something new in religion. But for the most part, they didn't listen. That's chapter 17 of Acts of the Apostles. This has been a basic Bible study. Thanks for joining us, and we'll hope to see you next time. God bless you.